If you take your food personally, like me, then you need to get on the Thrive food discovery and ordering app. Join the community of foodies on the Thrive feed, where you can curate restaurant lists, ask for recos, and chat about all things food. So download it today and start thriving. Welcome to today's episode of Speak Greasy. My guest is Anurag Arora, who headed design for Uber and Twitter. Well, I think he's now more known by the food-obsessed fraternity for his amazing supper clubs, which he hosts in Bangalore. So since you've just recently cooked at Max Street Kitchen, tell us what that experience was like.
Overall experience was beautiful. I think a lot of overwhelming support from this kitchen. This kitchen is beautiful. I just pulled anyone and everyone I could find into my thing. I was like, you know what, like I need to roll bread. And I'm like, hey, come and help me. And I think that was very cool. We were able to pull together such a large number, at least, for me, very, very easily. And I think the guest response was, you were part of it. And I think the guest response was super cool too. Yeah, very happy about it.
Well, this is my second meal cooked by you. And I have to tell you that, I have been following you on Instagram for ages. And when I messaged that I was going to Bangalore, there were friends of mine in Bombay who were like, you have to check out Anurag Arora's supper club. And, so you have clearly a big following in Bombay as well. And I have to say, this was one of the best meals we've had. And we rarely do brunches, it's more dinners.
Yeah.
But I think you really hit the nail on the head. But let's go back a little bit and understand how you got into this. I always feel really funny asking this because I'm the last one to talk about moving into the F&B world from a completely different
I know, right?
professional background.
Yeah.
But what triggered your sort of interest?
For me personally, I think I was just a casual cook as a kid. And I think I am very close to my mother. I won't say it was. At some point, she was like, we are a Punjabi family. She calls me nanni. I shouldn't, say this on this podcast. But she was like, nanni atta gunde, which means, can you make the dough for me? And I think now I think about it because I made so much dough as a kid. Like now I'm really into breads and so many other things. But I think step by step, I started doing things with her. I'd say I learned a little bit of food from her, but I think from that point, I left the home, for my graduation, and I, read all these fancy magazines. We had this library. I'd like come back with a recipe and, come home, cook for her and like try to, almost impress her. And I'd be like, hey, you know what? I learned this new, I'm like a better cook than you, and I'll like make something, for her. And she's quite a socialite. So if, let's say she likes something, which is rare, then she'll be like, so tomorrow we are making a large batch of this.
And I'm calling all my friends.
No, not calling. We would send plates into like people's houses, like full mohalla situation, So we'll be like, I remember as a kid, I used to make like white sauce pasta, right? Like this is like really, really long back, which people didn't even in Punjab knew what this thing is. So we'd make a large batch in a kadahi, and then send like plates to people's houses. You know what I mean? So she used to make me do this as a kid, which is pretty cool. From that point, I think it never occurred as a task to me, right? It's something I enjoy. And then I went to design school, NID, and there also, I used to take whatever kitchen possible, right? We'll go to the canteen kitchen and be like, I'm going to make something for everyone today. And I did that. A lot of friends know me for that. Post that, came to Bangalore, had my own house, own kitchen. I was very clear how the kitchen should be. That kitchen was very dear to me. I think that's where I started cooking a lot more. That's where I was like, started coming up with meals which were new. I always wanted to think about like, hey, sure, I can make a great carbonara, but I don't want to serve that to, like a community or like people outside my friends. So one time I remember I had a menu which was completely new. It was called Tropical Flavors with Anurag, quite a mouthful. But, that was a menu which was all new. It was things that, were inspired from my travels or whatever. I remember I used to travel with my Uber job quite a lot. I remember once I went to Chicago and I was like, oh, wow, the menus are from all over the place. There is no cuisine as a concept anymore. Like table, right? Yeah. Like you have like your ginger broth and your pasta happening. I think I saw that, around the same time as well. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this is who I am. Like, I don't really, stick to a cuisine. So I put together a menu. I forgot the name of the company, but I basically partnered with someone. We did a 6-people table on my terrace. Great response. It was pretty cool to me. I was like, oh wow, this is outside of my friend group. It's cool that someone I don't know is knowing me through my food, and I could see happy faces. So that was very addictive, and I think it goes back to childhood in a way, right? Like you send plates out, and kada getting popular in the popular kid. People love you for the food, and I think that was pretty cool to me.
But it's one thing when you're doing it for fun and with no agenda and for your neighbors, and it's sort of, and it's another thing when you're doing it, where you invite people over, and it's like it's a more kind of formal process in a way. Did that sort of change things for you in terms of, did it put a different kind of pressure on you maybe to like perform?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I think that's always there, right? Even if you're inviting friends over, honestly. Like, I think for me, like, I have that whole thing, right? Like, I've cancelled parties where something didn't turn out right. I'm like, okay, cool. No party happening today. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I think that pressure is kind of ingrained in me. And I think that comes also from design in a way, if you think about it. Because, like, you kind of put out your brand out, right? I think you, especially as a designer, you learn that very early on. And you can't put, like, substandard work out. Similarly, I kind of think about, food in a similar way, right? I think you can't really put out, and I've done a lot of these things. I remember, like, recently we did a soft serve in my house, which is stupid idea, I must admit. But like we did soft serve, and then my fuse went out, of course. And then
Murphy is low.
Yeah, and then we turn on the machine on. The ice cream is churning again, and it gets grainy. And then we had like grainy soft serve coming out. I spent a lot of money on that shit because I was like, I rented a machine. It came out. We of course brought it like a refrigerator. Had to get boxes so that people don't like figure out there is some soft serve machine going into someone's house. So I spent a lot of money on that, and then suddenly I had grainy ice cream. Then I was like, cool. So let's think about what can we do now. It was tasty. A lot of people told me that, but I was just like, hey, we can't charge for this. I don't want to waste, of course, because, there's so much on-glaze that you've made. But we're just like, hey, bro, soft serves on the house. You know what I mean? So I think that is kind of ingrained in me in some way where I just take extra pressure for everything. Everything I do.
Well, I think it comes with the territory of being a perfectionist, which in design, yes, there's the whole creative part of it. But then it's also, especially when you're working with apps and things, and like it has to...
You can't
like, it can't be like a sort of... Chalta hai.
Also, I've been, interestingly, I've been working for, products that have millions of users, right? Like I remember like once, I don't know if I can say this on camera, but like we had in one of the companies, $1 billion impact by 7 to 8 people in 3 weeks of work. You know what I mean? So you've been in these scenarios where you have to put together something really, really good, and otherwise it wouldn't cut it, right? Because let's take an example of Uber, right? Like, how many millions of people are using it, every day. And I see that it's not just, of course, a product where you get drunk and need a cab. It's also like mobility is freedom for everyone, right? Like when you think about it. So that care has kind of come from the design part as well, as you rightly sort of pointed out. Yeah.
But do you ever find that part of the perfectionism sort of interferes, or does it complement what you're doing with the food?
I'll tell you where are the places where I don't like, this behavior. For example, I don't repeat menus at all. I think the Mac Street was really the first one where we are like, okay,
it's a new audience. It doesn't count.
It's a new audience. They've been looking at these photos. They want the same food. Let's make it happen. You know what I mean? But like, for my brunch club, right, we don't do it until I have a new menu in my head, which could take time. You know what I mean? So I think I have all these weird principles to myself where I think the frequency of what I do is slows down sometimes. But just because, hey, I'm not feeling creative, I don't have an idea, so I'm not going to do anything. I think we have now a new format, which is the fried chicken and flowers, which is the only format I think is for me where I'm like, okay, this is an idea which we're going to repeat, only idea we're going to repeat. And whenever I'm feeling not that creative, we just put that out, right? And just stay in the scene.
There's enough demand. I mean, that's the thing about even restaurants, right? You're always trying to find that balance between signature or old favorites and continuing to innovate and put something new out. And there's always this love-hate with
I know what you mean.
with that. So yeah, I mean,
I think with restaurants, it's a lot more, right? For example, last night I went to the table. I'll be like, oh, if the ginger broth dumpling is not on the menu, I'll be pissed. But I don't think that's the same for. I think that's what this format allows, right? You are like, I'm not a restaurant, and every time you're gonna step into this house, it's going to be a new thing. And I think people kind of buy that now. You know what I mean?
well, I know that, like, since we're in Mac Street Kitchen, I think that's what people come here for, is that it's not a restaurant and you'll never have the same meal twice. And that's the sort of new experience that people are looking for, every single time. So I totally get that. Let's talk a little bit about this concept of supper clubs, because I'm seeing in the last, I've been in this business now, whatever, 13 odd years.
Crazy.
But in the last year or so, and I don't know if this is an outcome of COVID, where people were sort of cooking more at home, entertaining more at home, I'm not sure. But I've definitely seen this becoming, it's not like, it's a thing. We have a few people I know who do this in Bombay. And of course, now you're infamous for doing it. And I'm sure there's, others in Bangalore. But I've attended a couple where I've, met cool new people and I love it. And there's good food and it's just a great evening. What is it like for you? You're the one actually doing the food. So is it a little more stressful than it is for the guests that you have over? What's the sort of...
No, that's a fair question, right? I think the pressure is, I'd say, as high as restaurants, right? I think, especially if you're trying to put craft food out, right? If you're trying to put like plated stuff, for example, right? Which is what I do. Imagine if I were running, like a, I don't know, Mughlai supper club, if that was a thing, right? You were like, hey, okay, I have this format, and I have these recipes, and I put together a large batch, and people come in on a same table, in a communal sort of a table, and they enjoy it. Again, I've not done it, so I'm not going to say it on their behalf. I would imagine it's a little easier, maybe 10% easier. Again, just to be politically correct, it's more. But for something like this, right, you're basically looking at many elements to the meal. It's similar to putting, a meal in a restaurant, right, where you have like these many elements to the same dish. You are taking care of vegetarians, which is
also, do you take preferences?
No, it's just like
you like, I'm making this, take it or leave it.
No, I do that sometimes, and you get hate messages on Instagram for that. You like, especially fried chicken and flowers. People are like, why won't you do something vegetarian? I was like, have you seen the name? You know what I mean? But I think in other formats like Brunch Club, right? I think increasingly I'm like spending a lot more time thinking about, and I don't hate, I love vegetarian food. I turned into a meat eater just 7 to 8 years back. I spent,
Wow, Punjabi vegetarian.
That's really not a thing. That's really not a thing, because we are like the second most vegetarian state in the country.
I'm Punjabi. I know how much non-veg we eat.
Yeah, the thing is the 4-5% who are eating are consuming way too much. Maybe that's what is happening.
Making up for the rest.
Yeah, I know. But we like growing up in I've grown up in Mughal. Like we don't know families who are meat eaters. So that's it's a stretch when you think about it. So I love vegetarian food. I digress, of course, but I also want to put out whatever came to my head, right? I think I see food as really my creative extension, because I think with design you are really trying to meet goals. With food, it's like, this is what I feel like today, and this is the menu that I really want to do. But now I'm kind of pulling back a little and be like, okay, let's put a couple of vegetarian dishes in the menu as well. I did a full vegetarian.
You did?
Yeah.
Under duress. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know.
But the interesting thing that you just said about how with design you have a goal versus with the food you're being creative. I actually feel that as a chef you also have a goal of just making everyone really happy at the end of the meal. And I have to say, you really nailed it, and
that means a lot,
And so if you ever decide to go the professional way with your food, I think you've got something there. But just sort of coming back to the supper club idea, it's interesting because for you, it's about putting your creativity out there. And for the people coming, it's also about like an adventurous experience, but it's also about meeting new people. Do you get to meet cool new people through this? And have you ever had any awkward moments with some not so cool people I know.
Thankfully, I haven't, and I think we meet a lot of cool people. Especially, I think I have 2 formats right now. Especially this year, I've done many before, but this year is the fried chicken and flowers is really a party. Because all the prep work happens the day before. On the day, it's executing a sandwich. How tough is that, right? I now thankfully have a team who can kind of put things together. That's really a party, right? And we meet a lot of cool people. People make friends, and it's not intentional. I'm not like trying to put together like a communal thing where, hey, come make friends or like find a date. Like those things, it's not that. But it happens. You know what I mean? And all kinds of things happen. And one thing that I do, which I haven't said before at all, is I mostly stalk everyone. Because it's my house. You know what I mean? So,
exactly. I mean, that sounds weird, but I can kind of understand that as well.
I'm like, okay, go on Instagram, Facebook.
That's one that you didn't know. Did I have to tell you who I'm bringing?
No, you haven't. You don't. But
you trust me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how it works.
As in whoever you.
Yeah. I trust you, don't worry. But like, if I look at someone, I'm like, yeah, looks like a normal person. So, be okay with it. We haven't had a bad experience. I think I've only met really, really cool people through this.
No, but has anyone ever said like, oh, I don't like this, do you have something else to eat or anything? Or people generally well behaved?
Thankfully not. And I feel like the format kind of weeds out, people who probably would act like, unless I make bad food, which is completely acceptable. You could come, too much salt. Like you could come up to me and say that. But I think the fact that someone would not understand the food, I think that hasn't happened just because I think the format, right? I think we put out pictures, you've seen it, right? We take cool pictures, we put it out, people kind of know what they're getting into.
An informed choice,
yeah.
So I want to talk about your, what you think about this idea of home chefs sort of now cooking for, a paying guest, right? Like it's one thing when you have friends over and you're cooking for them, and it's another thing when you're charging people. And I have to admit, like at Mag Street, it took me a while before I became comfortable with the idea of non-restaurant experienced chefs coming. And I'll tell you why that happened. So back in like 2016 when we just opened, and this was a very new concept as a the format of like coming into a kitchen and all of this, right? So I remember when we started off with all these like very cool international chefs coming and month after month, and then people started reaching out to us as who had got out and saying like, hey, I'd love to
do something.
Yeah. And the way we conceptualized this space was that it was meant to be a platform, a venue, right? It was not meant to be like, oh, you made the cut or you didn't, because the idea was that it's a space, hey, let someone who does their thing come and let people make a choice based on, like researching, whatever, it's Instagram. And we're just a venue, right? We're not that filter. That's how I started out, thinking about this space. And I remember it was one, they weren't a home chef, but they were pretty small. And it was not at the par of what we'd been doing for the previous few months. And I got a lot of sort of flack for that, where people were like, how could you have let them cook here? And I was like, I'm not the gatekeeper, or it's not about me letting someone or not. That's actually kind of the opposite of what we wanted to do here. But I realized soon enough that whether I like that or not, or whether that's what I intend, that's how people perceive it, right? That they think that there's been some curation, that there's been, a vetting of sorts. And so having accepted that, I became sort of more cognizant of who was coming. And, post-COVID, when we had this 2-year hiatus and we started, we restarted doing events here, the home chefs had really kind of like blossomed during this time.
Yeah, up their game.
And like whether it was out of necessity or boredom or whatever it was a thing. Like they had started cooking out of their homes, were probably still cooking out of their homes, but like cooking like some damn mean shit. That's when I realized there does need to be some...
There is a line.
Criteria or benchmark, or not criteria, but like a standard. But I know as someone in the industry that it took me a while to be open to this and really push it and promote it with our audience, because they would be missing out otherwise. But I still find that the audience has a little bit of a doubt, because it doesn't come with the whole necessarily, band baja of a sort of, a restaurant.
And the warrants and all that.
Exactly. And do you ever get asked this? Why should people be paying? Like, you've not been to like culinary school,
Sure,
you've not worked in a restaurant. Do you really understand like the technical aspects? Like, where do you sort of get off charging people, right? Like, I mean, it's a fair question, I think.
It is. No. It's a very fair question.
So how would you kind of...
I fortunately or unfortunately have a strong opinion, right? I wouldn't pay for my own food at a certain point when I started, because of course, like again, like I think it's a great experience and all of that, but I feel like there are certain aspects to this that I think should be learned. That's just how I think about it, because I feel like previously when I started, your plates look beautiful and all that, just maybe because I'm a designer or whatever, right? Like the final thing going out is good, but behind the whole thing was a mess. I'll be very honest with you, right? Like it was a home kitchen. I didn't know how to stay organized. I didn't know how to, stay clean and all of that. I personally went around, worked in a lot of restaurants as a stagiaire. Whenever I traveled, like I worked in, London, I worked in San Francisco and Rue and a lot of other places. And I thought like those basics made a huge difference in the way I think. I don't think it made a difference in terms of how I think about food, but it did make a huge difference in terms of how I organize myself. Like with kitchens, right? One mishap, it fucks up the service, right? It's just real. It's for chefs as well. It's not even, let's call
it. Just the problem gets sort of exponentially harder.
Exactly.
You don't have that daily experience.
Exactly. I feel like personally, I went through that whole phase. I spent a lot of time at least questioning myself, finding out, and I'm generally very, very open to learning, right? The people I work with, the people who are in my kitchen, like, Sid who came here, and I'm always looking at him and I'm like, okay, this is a better way of doing that. So I think I went through that whole school myself in some ways. And I think that's how I would say I was able to scale. If someone kind of inherently learns that, great for them. But I feel like for me, I think that went through a progression. And I would imagine a lot of people probably are also kind of going into that direction. I know a friend of mine who is in San Francisco trying to get into this. And she's like, on a Sunday, I'm going and, working in a couple of restaurants, right? And at some point when I feel that I'm ready to, food safety, like small things, right? I think these are very, very important things. Once you are kind of past that education, at least the basic bits, I feel like then you are kind of ready. And that's how she's seeing it. And I'm hoping that's how, this community sees it, so that every time, a home chef kind of comes into a kitchen like this, like they have an experience where they are not able to distinguish who it was cooked by. It should be the plate that decides. It's like photography, right? When it's a very similar, like now it's accessible, right? Like all of us have really good cameras. So it's not gate kept anymore in some ways. And I feel like this is same, but again, you should learn the tricks of the trade, the basics of the trade, especially I'd say definitely things like safety, especially if you're dealing with things like meat and all. You're cooking for 5 friends, sure, good. But the minute you are inviting someone who doesn't know you, they're putting their trust in you with a meal, and let's say serving a tartar or something like that, right? Like you want to make sure that you follow those rules, right? Yeah. That's how I think.
No, and in fact, I mean, this is for anyone who's listening and who's, thinking about this. I know that for me, one of the biggest concerns is when you're cooking for like 20, 25, 30 people, plating up in a certain time frame and also keeping that momentum going of the meal, where it's like the first 2 courses don't come out 5 minutes after each other and then the next one's like 30 minutes later, because that's actually, it's yes, of course, a large part is about the food, but it's also about that experience of how you sort of enjoy that.
Yeah, is maybe 70% service, right? Yeah. Kind of comes down to that, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I'm like watching that space sort of carefully. But you're absolutely right that little bit of experience, whether it comes from staging in restaurants or which I think is actually the best way to get it. Yep. If I don't know how open people are right now in India to accept staging.
You have to peel 30 kg onions, like before you get into that's everyone has to pay that. If you want some sort of a longevity to this, right? Like we could do like 3-4. But at some point, people are, there are going to be repeats. There are going to be all those things. There are going to be people telling friends, right? Like, for example, our current format is super viral in Bangalore. Like, we put it out, it sells out right away. But I think it kind of comes down to then those people, maybe, 40, 50 people coming on the weekend, they're going to tell, 300 other people, so.
They're going to tell them if it was good and they're going to tell them if it's bad. That's
Right. Yeah, you're right. I think if it's in a...
work both ways.
If it's in the middle, like no one's going to... Yeah, we went there, whatever. It was fine. But I think the minute you are like, great, yes, people are going to talk about it. And you see that wait list going up. And if it's bad, you know that, you hear from the hush-hush, right? You know that. When your food is not delivering, you know that. It's very easy to tell.
Talking about the food, I mean, the last two experiences I've had of your food have definitely got a slight Asian.
Yeah. It's ways.
What's the inspiration behind your cooking?
It's going to be I'm gonna try to like sound philosophical, but like it's actually really simple. Like I feel like I have phases. Really, this is what it is, right? Like I think I started with this. Once I had a pizza phase because I went to Naples and had like, I wasn't into pizzas. I went to Naples and it's a convert. Everyone is a convert once you go there. And I came back and I was like, man, this is, completely different. And I started making, Neapolitan style pizzas with the ingredients what's available here. I had a year and a half long phase. You won't believe it. It ended up me putting up a wood-fired situation.
I was just sort of asked, you do need a wood-fired oven.
I know, right?
Even get started on that.
Yeah, no, but I did start there.
Flour and the San Marzano tomato was just mozzarella.
I know. For me, it was just like I kept going, and I think I got to a very good place. And so I was like, oh, this is tasty, but I think there is something missing. And I think the ingredient that was missing was fire. So I was like, okay, now we need to make that happen, at some point. And, next trip, uni, which now is very popular, but I bought it before it was cool. But 2016, I guess, I got like a friend of mine I basically was in SF, bought the whole thing, got a friend, like 3 or 4 of my friends, because it's very heavy, right? It's like 55 kgs or something. And we all like bought parts of it over 6 months and then we assembled it together. So I have this whole obsession situation. I had that sourdough phase. Then I think Italian was a huge, very long phase. And I think now I'm in my Asian phase. But I think for me, while this is happening, I'm also very cuisine agnostic. So by phase, like you said, you saw a lot of Asian stuff. I think it's coming from like me being a month and a half in Vancouver, which is like really like, the Taiwanese sort of a neighborhood, right? Like I think I was in that area. We used to go to this, mall and the food court situation, which generally is never a good experience. But there, it was like a Chinese mall with a very good food court, banging food. And I ate a lot of stuff, you know what I mean? And I think that hasn't left me yet. If that makes sense.
This sounds like, artists who have that blue period.
Yeah, sure.
Asian
phase going on, but I think I'm slowly moving back into my Italian phase. But whenever I do, I bring back the previous phase, part by part. Few things that kind of make sense in that phase. So
you mentioned like a sourdough phase, but I know one thing that, and I don't know if that happened during COVID, like it did for the rest of the world. But did you also go through a banana bread phase? Because that cake that you served up at your brunch was, I think, literally the highlight of the entire meal. I mean, there were so many highlights, but that was one amazing way to finish.
Yeah.
So are you going to share the recipe?
Yeah, we'll put it on your menu. But I didn't have those phases because I think I think people had those sourdough or banana bread sort of phases because I think these are people who were kind of getting into these things. I think I've kind of gone through those periods in a way, I would say. I think now my whole COVID was really like kind of coming up with new stuff. I did a lot of delivery because that was the only medium you could share with people. I just come back from London, like starting in restaurants and all, and I was like, I need to cook.
Like
and
fired up to cook.
And I was in this, apartment, so I was like, okay, this is what it is. So in my COVID, I did a lot of menus. It was very, very good for me personally. Like a lot of growth in a very weird way, right? Especially with delivery. And I know I'm digressing, but especially with delivery, it's like really hard, right? It's a form, I'm sure you would know. It's a very hard format because, you want the experience to be a certain way. So I obsessed, all of COVID about what should we cook that delivers in the way, you suppose the person to, eat in some way.
You're definitely thinking like a chef and restaurateur. Before you move out of your Asian phase, your Chinni oil is, I think, it's more popular than even you are. I think it's Spain precedes you. What's the secret behind that?
Yeah.
I'm asking for too many trade tricks here.
I generally do a lot of like, fermented soybeans. I generally do mushroom too, but I know like coming here, I knew there was allergy. And also you actually had a version which is 10%, it was 10% lower than how I would put like my best version, because we do like dried mushrooms in it as well. But that,
the mushroom allergy is not a real allergy, right? For most people, they're just like, I don't want mushroom. I know, if I tell them that, then they're just not. It's just like, go on, treat it. So
it's such a hard thing, right? With cooking for, like a totally vegetarian crowd, they'll always be like, we don't want mushrooms. And I'm like, oh, who is this thing for?
But we'll have truffles.
Yeah, we'll have, keep shaving till I tell you to stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Listen, thank you so much for being so candid, and it's it's really like I'm so happy that people are taking that plunge into pursuing these passions that they have of cooking. I, for one, am not doing that anytime soon, which I think many people will be grateful for. But we end every episode with a fun game where you have to tell us 3 statements about yourself, which are true and one is not.
Okay. I have to think about this, but I think the lie is the one I have to think about. The largest we have, the largest amount of people that we have served in one go is 144. Number 2, I once cooked Indian food in a Sardinian restaurant in Emilia-Romagna.
Okay, this is unfair.
Okay.
I don't know both of these are lies.
Okay, sure. And number 3, someone flew down from Chennai to Bangalore just for our pop-up and then went back.
Okay, that I believe. So that's the truth.
Sure, we'll see.
The 144, I don't know. Like, first of all, that's such a vague number. But I'm going to go with the Sardinian meal or restaurant. What was it?
Indian meal in Sardinia.
Indian meal in Sardinia in...
You got it wrong. That's true. That is true. The lie is actually, we served 85. I made like this very specific number to make it believable, and you fell for it.
I did. Well, hopefully everyone else knows you a little better than I do after this. But thank you so much for being on the show, and I really wish you all the best. And we're very much looking forward to having you back at Mike Street, maybe in your Italian phase.
Yes, 100%.
And cooking for all of us.
Thank you so much. This was so nice.
Thank you.